And welcome back to the Young Dad Podcast, whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, changing dirty diapers, or maybe you finally got a moment to sit back, relax, and listen to your favorite podcast. Wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, thank you for listening and thank you for tuning in. And of course, here on the Young Dad Podcast, we dive deep into parenting, fatherhood, faith, mental health, and everything that helps become more present, engaged, and intentional dad. Today's guest is Healy, a licensed professional counselor, marriage and family therapist, Army veteran, and the host of the Healthy and Redeemed podcast. With over 17 years in the mental health field and a passion for helping Christians manage anxiety, fear, and worry through biblical principles, Healy is here to help us navigate both our own emotional health and that of our kids. If you've ever felt overwhelmed as a dad, struggled with anxiety, or wondered how to help your kids through life challenges while keeping your faith strong, well, today's episode may just be for you. So sit back, relax, grab a juice box, grab a snack, and we're going to jump right into it. So, Healy, first of all, welcome to the show. It's amazing to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and pleasure to be here.
Of course. And first of all, before I get into anything, I do want to thank you for your service
Thank you.
in the military. It's always great to have veterans on the show. And I always appreciate being able to talk to a veteran. My grandparents, my grandpas specifically, were veterans, and that's kind of where it stopped in my family.
You never know. Some of your daughters could.
I hope so. I think
Yeah.
there's one that's going to be more likely than the other one because she's a little bit more savage. But
Mm-hmm.
I encourage both. I encourage both my daughters. My older one's in second grade, and we have that conversation all the time. She's like, college and this and that and the other. I'm like, well, don't just get one track mind toward college. Don't forget, there's other things you can do with your life. There's trade school. You can go into the military. And every time she hears military, she goes, no, kind of thing. And she's very girly. The other one's
You
in
might be
preschool.
surprised, though.
Yeah, I'm sure she would be surprised when she gets older. She learns about everything she can actually do, and how much success that can set her up for. I've gotten deep into the weeds on this topic before with some other veterans from veteran dads and whatnot. It's really surprising. There's an endless amount of jobs, it seems, for girls and for women in the army and in the military in general.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't a girl that anybody would ever think I would join the military. That's what I say. You never know. There are all kinds of women in the military.
Yeah. So it's awesome though. It's always an option. It
Yeah.
is always an option.
Yeah. That's good that you're teaching them that because, yeah, school kind of does the one track thing where college is the only avenue. But I think a lot of kids miss out on like living out their talents and things that they would really enjoy by just knowing there are other options.
Yeah. Well, college is still an option even after,
That's right.
4 years of military service. You go and serve your first 4 years, and then after that, you get out, and then college is paid for. So it's an economical route to go. Plus, you're a veteran, so then you start getting discounts, and then you have the ability to buy a home easier, and you have all these perks that come with serving for 4 years. Women, I'm not sure how typical it is, but women don't typically go into combat areas.
Well, they serve in different places, but yeah, they're not usually on the front line, but I don't know any more about that. They may be.
Yeah, and things are changing.
Depending.
And so by the time my girls are military age, who knows what it'll look like and who knows what it'll be. So,
Right.
but it's exciting.
That's right.
But it's something important we have to teach our kids. Like, there are other options. You don't have to just go this one size fits all allegedly kind of route. So, but Healy, you've had an incredible journey as it is, from army to mental health counseling to running your own practice. What has led you to focus on that? Take us kind of through your story a little bit.
Well, my reasons for joining the military weren't all that noble. A friend just talked me into it because I didn't really know what I was going to do after high school. I thought, wow, I've got a lot of education here, 12, 13 years. She kind of, once I talked to the recruiter, I'm like, oh, this seems like a good thing, and went into the reserve for about 7+ years and then joined active duty after that and found I liked it. It gave me a lot of things I needed in my life, confidence and discipline and just ambition and just the whole thing. I did, while I was in the reserve, go to college. And I'm a big advocate of, like, you don't have to like choose what you're going to do for your whole life when you're young. Like you can do lots of different things because I have in my life. I just do where I'm at the moment. And then if that changes, then that's great. And so while I was in active duty, I went back to get my master's, and they had some counseling courses in that program. And I'd had some nice compliments from the instructors and stuff. And so when I got out of the military, I worked for a nonprofit, but just trying to think, what do I want to do? I mean, it was a great job. I loved it. But again, like I didn't feel like I was using all my talents. So decided to look into counseling and see what requirements were needed, and had to go back to school again, and then got my license. And that's kind of where, I ended up just working in mental health. So, yeah.
What has led you to connecting, mental health, biblical principles, and doing the work that you do now specifically? How did you end up going down that path?
Well, it was pretty natural. I am a Christian and I have been my whole life. And see, there was a little phase there that I wasn't walking it out very well, but kind of seeing the world through that lens. And I went to a school to get that second master's that was specifically in counseling. That was from a Christian university here in Northwest Arkansas. And they have an excellent counseling program. You don't have to use your faith. They teach you how to integrate it, but you don't have to. A lot of people don't. But just the more that I worked with people and had Christians coming into my practice, I just found that the Bible has like all this psychology stuff in it that really help people, and especially when they're having questions about, how do you balance anxiety and being a Christian, or balance worry and being a Christian, or, just like the worries about dying. And, Christians just have a different perspective generally, but you can use psychology too, but like that's all in the Bible. So it kind of just naturally formed. I mean, I worked for an agency that wasn't a Christian organization, and if people wanted faith integrated, I would do that. But if they didn't, that's fine. Truth is truth, and I can speak it. I just don't have to tell you everything where it comes from,
Yeah, true.
because I do have the secular side, the psychology side. It's all there anyway, so it's not like I'm pulling stuff out of my hat.
Yeah. No, it's interesting to try to mix those 2 things, or to try to keep them separate, right? Because there is a lot of overlap. There's a ton of overlap. And like you said, truth is truth, and it's hard to keep those things separate. I also work in mental health. And so it can be really difficult not to cross those lines, because it's really easy to cross those lines and to try to understand those things, which is, it's hard to not teach someone those things when they don't want to know them. But it's really easy to integrate those things, and really helpful to someone when they understand like the basic faith principles on their own, and then they can take those and integrate those into the counseling and the services that you're offering them, and then their progress seems to be more, I don't want to say like permanent, more, but it lasts longer, or it's more sufficient, right? Or it's more impactful versus the person who's just kind of learning the psychology or getting the skills secularly, right?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I bet, identity is a perfect example of that, because that is one area that, if people are struggling with their value or their worth, like it's really hard to pull from a secular, like their value and their worth. Like it all has to come internally. But we know that we are God's creation, and that puts us a different kind of place. So we are all messed up. That's okay. God feels those gaps for us, so we don't have to, we don't have to be enough, because God is enough for us. But on this other side, they have to like look inwardly and rely all on themselves, even though they are flawed and messed up. So it's a really hard, especially with identity, to come at it in some helpful way for them, because at some point they'll get to, gosh, I am a big mess. Like, because we are. I mean, thankfully, God covers that. He's made us with value and worth, but we get that from Him. We don't get that from ourselves, because if you don't believe in anything, what is your purpose? Like
Mhm.
it's hard to pull it from, like, if you believe in evolution, like it's hard to believe we're here for a purpose if you just believe we just evolved here. But in the Christian faith, we know there's a God, and we know he made us with value and worth, and we can stand in that. And that's, to me, a lot firmer foundation than just if you're wallowing out there, you know,
Yeah,
it's
no,
trying to rely all on yourself.
I agree, and that identity thing's hard, right, for a lot of people. Like, everyone seems to struggle with their identity, especially our kids, and
Mhm.
we'll jump into that aspect of it in a second, but you're 100% right, right? We, as Christians or as people of faith, we understand, like, okay, our identity is pretty simple, pretty laid out for us. Like, the answer is right here, and we don't have to rely on ourselves. We understand that we're sinners, we're messed up, we're not perfect, we're imperfect, we struggle, we're all these things, right? We understand that. Pretty pretty straightforward. And now, being Christian, we can be like, oh, okay, well, this is our identity, but we're made whole through God, through Christ, through the cross, through salvation. We're made whole again. We don't deserve this grace, but we get this grace. We're given this grace through Jesus, right? And we have this opportunity to know what happens to us after we die, and all these other things. And it's really great because it answers some of those big life questions that not a lot of people have answers to. But there's an answer out there for everybody. You just have to be willing to accept it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
But a lot of parents, right, especially dads, I'll speak of here, we struggle with anxiety in a lot of different areas, whether with our identity, being just dads in general, or with our kids, and stress ourselves, whether it's work stress, financial worries, or just trying to be a good parent. But when our kids start showing signs of anxiety, which can be related to identity, school, friendships, relationships, everything, right? They can show anxiety. It can feel super overwhelming to know how to help. So, where the heck can we as parents start? Where can we start?
Well, I think if we have to teach our kids like good coping skills, and teach them truth from a very young age, like teaching them to be able to identify their gifts and their talents, and helping them learn how to cope with their emotions and not being afraid of those. So, I think the things that we do, that we are good examples of that. We try to model that behavior for them so they learn it, but we can also teach them things too. So if they come home from school and someone's called them I'll give you an example. My son came home from school one time, like kindergarten or something, and he was wearing the Velcro shoes. And so the kids were teasing him that he didn't know how to tie his shoes. And I said, but you do know how to tie your shoes. And he said, yeah, but they're saying I don't. And I would try to teach them in that lesson, it doesn't really matter what people say, the truth is what matters. So you don't have to go fighting and showing. I mean, you could show them you can tie your shoes, but at the end of the day, it's not what other people say. That doesn't define what truth is. If you know what the truth is, that's what you stand on. So simple things like that can be very helpful for kids in learning. Like, I don't need to have to listen to all that outside stuff. And even me growing up, that's where I got a lot of my messages, which really affected my self-esteem, was hearing it from other people saying certain things about me that weren't true. But I just took them on, I believed them. Yeah, then to come to find out the truth of who God made me to be, and that's where I settle now. I don't have to go out proving who I am. I know who I am. And if someone makes an incorrect judgment, I mean, if it's appropriate, I can correct it, but I don't need to let it ruin who I am. So when kids are, especially that sort of thing, that's important that we teach them identity in that. And for anxiety, just teaching them how to control their thoughts. They've got control over that. And I work with kids a lot. And depending on the age, you can teach them some different things. But number one, just learning how to cope. Or if they believe in God, you can help them learn how to pray and to do things that will help them maneuver through that.
Absolutely. So, but for us as parents, if how does our anxiety impact our kids? And how can we create like that sense of security for them to not let our anxiety become their anxiety?
Yeah, that's why I think it's really important for parents to learn themselves how to manage their anxiety. And that comes through thoughts and behaviors, and they can learn coping skills. So because kids are going to pick that up.
Right.
If you're like worried about death, guess what they're going to be worried
Be worried
about?
about
Or
death.
you're,
Absolutely.
yeah, worried about going to the doctor. Guess what? They don't want to go to the doctor either. So, but even being open about that, like I'm kind of afraid because of, I mean, it's good to identify specifically what the fear is. Like I'm afraid to go to the doctor because da da da. But I know that that's not true. And so I'm going to go to the doctor anyway. Like I'm going to do it even though I'm afraid to do it because I know it's safe or whatever is the thing, that could be helpful to them learning how to. Now that's kind of age appropriate too, because you don't want to be instilling fear that they may not have thought of either. So you have to be wise in that, but just being open about how you're handling your own anxieties. So parents do have to get a hold of that and be able to manage that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? Like they will pick up 100%. Like if you're afraid of a storm coming and you're panicking and whatnot, that may not show up in them at the age that they're currently at, but maybe when they're older, they'll be like, "Oh my God, a storm! We have to do all these things and all these things and all this stuff," right? And it can come later. It doesn't always come right away. And I said storm because it's crazy windy outside here. I can hear I'm set up in my living room and I can hear the reef on my door just keep banging against my front door. So that's the only reason I thought of that. But I digress here.
It's true. Well, think about even our animals too. Like I had a dog that was so afraid of the thunder. I mean, he would like just try to crawl inside me. He was like all over trying to, but even if I was a little afraid too, like I had to really try to maintain that calm energy because that's the only way to, I mean, that energy is definitely contagious. So you really have to, and dogs are a little bit because you can't say anything, but just trying to that energy out of like, it's calm, it's okay. And that's where he felt most comfortable because if I'm calm, guess what? They're going to be calm too. Like, must be me.
Yeah. No, that's a good point too. Like with our it's the same with our animals and our kids. It's like our kids are
Mm.
animals too, but if we're how we model and how calm we are sets the tone for them, right? Like us as parents, we set the tone for our kids. We set the tone for our families. We set the tone for our household. Especially dads can really do that and have a huge impact on that and how we go about that in our day to day. We can really have a massive impact. The impact I want to break it down, but there's so much I can break down there, right? If we're calm and we're having fun and we're lighthearted and if we are just calm, like you're saying here, and we can relate it back to truth in some way, shape, or form, and help our kids see the truth, right? That's one of the really cool things about dads is that we think so logically and so black and white and so simplistic sometimes too overly simplistic and maybe too solution based sometimes, but we get to the truth pretty quickly and the solution pretty quickly and can help our kids say, well, the truth is it's this, and that, or the truth is this, or what you need to do is this, and that can really help our kids kind of cut through the weeds, essentially, because it makes it straightforward, it makes it easy, it makes it practical, it makes it applicable for them to be able to handle whatever they're going through because they have a direct line, a direct line.
I totally agree. I think that, put moms and dads, made that the family unit for a reason because there is a lot that each can offer in that raising children that they need.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so how does faith play a role in helping our kids work through their anxiety, but also calming our anxiety as parents and our children? What kind of role does faith play in all that?
Well, to me, that is like you've got more resources than anyone else. Like we have a ton of resources. So I normally have people get some scriptures that does calm them down or reminds them of truth. And kids can do that too, just a simple, like they could summarize if they didn't want to memorize, but kids are easy to memorize things. So that would be good if they could find something that helps soothe them. For my son again, he was afraid of the dark a lot. He was, I don't know if it was the dark, but he was scared that a burglar was going to come in the window. All kids have this fear. And so we were trying to talk over like what would help him feel safe, and praying, of course, when we went to bed helped him feel safe, and specifically focusing on God's protection. And then we created a little graphic and some words, God will protect me, and we put it on the ceiling. And so as he laid there at night, that's what he could focus on, and that really helped him just maneuver through that fear. And it's the same, like if he went into a dark space, like he would say a certain something to help him just be brave. So I think scripture memorization is really, really important, and finding those scriptures that resonate and teaching them to pray. So we can just share truth, but say, hey, let's go to God when we're afraid, because that's what God says to do. And he's going to help us to be brave. And if you've got some good stories that you've shared with them before about being brave, characters in the Bible that were brave when things were, Gideon's a good example that you can teach kids, not necessarily when they're afraid, but all the other times, so that they can pull those lessons in when they are afraid. So the Bible's loaded with resources that you can use, and scripture is one of them. Prayer is another, and then meditating just on the scripture itself, which is kind of what my son was doing when the words were up on the ceilings, just meditating on God's going to protect me.
I love that. I love that. And that kind of jumps right into where I wanted to go next with this, talking about like resilience through faith. You mentioned there that there's plenty of stories in the Bible, right? But it's 100% up to us as parents to either teach them to our kids, review them with our kids, or to be taking them to church to learn them or somewhere. But it 100% starts at home. It needs to come from home first, because that's where they're going to learn the most consistently. But you're 100% spot on here, right? There's so many examples of our great scripture heroes who were resilient, who were emotionally resilient, who were brave, who were courageous, who were scared, but who were able to overcome their fear and able to overcome their any emotions that they were feeling because of their faith. And you highlighted quite a few there that can really help our kids when they're struggling with that fear or with that worry. But what are some ways that we can continue to teach our kids to trust God more, even when things feel uncertain to them?
Well, I think for adults and children, the big thing is to learn scripture, because that's going to anchor them in truth. And so definitely learning scripture, I think, is a valuable one as they move forward. Learning how to pray is important too. Learning to feel confident in their own prayers can be helpful as they move forward and get older. And then learning, and I've taught this to even young kids, of learning how to change your thoughts and change your behaviors in the midst of fear. Like, we don't let our emotions tell us what to do. We use our logic and our truth to tell us what to do. So, because if we're afraid, we're going to run and hide. But if which is fine in certain situations, if there's a bear, you probably do need to run and hide. But if it's just that you're afraid of the thunder, well, we know thunder can't hurt you. I mean, a lightning strike might, but we can't hear that. But just teaching them the truth of that. If it's safe, we don't need to base our decisions on emotion. We base our decisions on God's truth. And then how to change our thoughts. So if we're thinking this, we identify what the thought that we're having. So I had a young girl who had been in a car accident, and it was a very traumatic car accident. And so, but she still had to ride in the car to go to school, like after she recovered from the accident. And that was really hard for her, because all this, we're going to get another accident again. So we really had to talk through, and she was young, but she was able to do that. We created some cards for her that had some truth statements on it, that I'm safe and my mom's here to protect me, and I made it through the other accident. Just things to kind of, like, even if it did happen again, that she can still know that she's going to maneuver through that and can use her strength and skills to get through that. So sometimes it's identifying the fear, the negative thought that they're having, and then learning to replace that. And for kids, I find it's helpful to have like little cards so you can remind yourself, especially in the situation. So she carried them with her so that when she was in the car, she could read through those things. And then we had coping skill cards too. So things that she could do when she was in the vehicle that would help her sing a song, pet her stuffed animal, whatever she had created to be able to do. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sometimes I get sidetracked.
No, and we can do a lot of things, right, to help teach our kids when they feel uncertain, right? And we can help provide them those comfort items, right? Or we can help find the things that will comfort them or that will help them, kind of bridge those gaps. That's kind of our job as parents, right? Because yes, our prayers can do a lot, God can do a lot, our faith can carry us, right? But that's the reason why us parents are here on earth, right? So that we can actually do those physical, tangible things for our kids to help them, feel trusted and to help them feel like someone's looking out for them, someone's got them, and to help them feel reassured that, okay, this happened for this reason, or I feel better because this happened, kind of thing. Or I feel better because mom and dad, they're here to help me through the uncertainty. And that can be an expression of trust, right? And that can be an expression of our faith by showing, okay, I'm going to trust that someone's going to help me. I'm going to trust that something's going to come through. I'm going to trust somewhere, somehow that this is going to happen. Some way, somehow, somewhere. This is going to happen. And it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine, kind of things. Are there any, like, misconceptions about faith and mental health that you know of that keep people from getting the help they need? Because a big one, I feel, like, especially in like the Christian community, is just, or in religion in general. I don't want to say just Christians. I want to say just in general with most faiths, is that it's like, well, you got God, you don't need anything else, kind of thing. I think that's the biggest one. And or it's more, well, that counseling's secular, and so they're not going to give you the enough of a faith-based perspective. But then your pastors and stuff don't necessarily have the same like training or same ability as someone that actually has gone to school, that knows it, that practices it, that does it every day, that knows how to do different forms of different counseling that may be beneficial for you or for your child. So what beyond that, you can touch on that. But are there any other misconceptions about faith and mental health that keep people from getting the help they need?
Well, I think they're probably, in some sense, all related to what you've said because, yeah, people, I've got God, I don't need anybody else. I've got other people I can talk to. Why do I need to pay a stranger? It's considered weak, or I shouldn't have this issue, and I will say, before there was a little part when I first started counseling, I thought, what am I doing? Is this even biblical that I'm a counselor? I don't know.
Right.
And as I was reading through the Bible, God just brought to my mind every time counselor showed up. Yes, it did show up as wonderful counselor describing him, but there were a lot of kings that required counselors to help them make decisions. And I suspect that those people were just a little bit more trained or had experience or wisdom that would help the king or whoever make decisions. And that's what I do think. I'm not here to tell you how to run your life. I'm here to help you walk through and become closer to God, or, in some sense, I think it takes a very strong person to come to counseling and say, yes, I would like somebody to walk alongside me that has some training in this area that can help me have that breakthrough, because I'm not the ultimate healer. God is. And even if I'm seeing unbelievers, I still believe that God will heal them. It's not me. But hopefully God uses me enough where I can say something that can, or ask a question or something that will bring an epiphany for them, that they can break through whatever's been stopping them from walking in healing. A lot of people to think that, yes, God should heal them. And so going to a counselor, that's not exhibiting any faith. But sometimes God does want us to walk through things and to really experience that healing. Sometimes you do have to walk through that healing. If you remember, what was his name? Naaman, the guy that had leprosy. And the little girl told him to go to the prophet, and the prophet said to go dip in the river 7 times. And he's like, I'm not going in the muddy Jordan River. I'm out of here. And they're like, why don't you? Like, what do you got to lose? Basically, that's the Healy paraphrase. And so he did do that. But he had to do something for his healing. And sometimes that is a step of faith in and of itself, of like, okay, I'm going to go get in the river. Okay, I'm going to go see a counselor, and have faith that that's going to be helpful to me too, especially if God is leading you that way. I think we should always seek the Lord first. But if it's something that's like very traumatic, or you're having a hard time just getting through that would be something to go see a counselor for. I don't even necessarily believe it's the first thing you could do. I think reading the word and seeking the Lord should be the first thing that you do. And if you're still having that obstacle or having a hard time just breaking through, that a counselor might be helpful for you. And I believe counseling, people don't have to do it forever, at least not the clientele I see. There are some people that would need to maintain for their life, unless God does a miracle, but like personality disorders and such. But for those I see, my goal is always that they can begin to learn the skills and do it out there on their own, and that I'm not the person that helps them do that initially, but that they can do that on their own, because that's ultimate freedom, where I've learned the skills and now I can go do the things.
Absolutely. No, and that's exactly how it should be for more providers, right? How it's like, okay, I'm going to show you what you need to know. I'm going to keep you here for as long as I need to keep you, but no longer. This isn't going to be your crutch, right? Like, you're here to gain these skills, you're here to get these things, and then you're out on your own. Again, like, you're here for short term. But I think you're absolutely right, right? There are instances in the Bible where kings and judges and rulers and even prophets and whatnot had people around them that were called counselors, or they had advisors, or whatever they were called, right? But there were people who knew more than them in some way, shape, or form. So they were getting advice from different people on different things, and they had people around them. I mean, Jesus had 12 apostles that he conferred with, that he talked to, that all had their own different set of skills and talents and things like that, because he needed that. He didn't have all those things as well. He did, because he's God. But, as a man, he made that example like, okay, I need these 12 people around me because they all have something that I don't have, or they all can do something that I can't do, kind of thing, which is so important. Last episode, kind of relating this back, last episode before this one that came out, we talked about men's groups and talked about how men being a men's group, you can gain different pieces of the puzzle from different people, and you can connect all that, right? The best place you can get it all from is from God and from the Bible. But here on earth, there's different people that can give you those different pieces of your puzzle that you need, whether that's counseling, maybe that's just talking to one of the pastors at your church, maybe that's talking to, friends, family, whatever. It can come from different places, right? But ultimately, you have to figure out where you can get it from, and you can't do that on your own all the time. A lot of time, you do need that help. You do need some help from God to kind of point you in the right direction, to lead you down the right path. Sometimes he'll tell you, sometimes he won't. If counseling is the route you have to take, and that's the form of action that you have to take for your faith, then that's what you have to do. You got to do what you got to do, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. God doesn't just give you options just for fun, or he doesn't tell you to go do things just because he wants to. Some of it's a test, some of it's to see how you're going to respond, some of it, and most of the time, it's for your own good, whether you like it or not. And it can be uncomfortable, it can be really hard. I'm not saying it's easy, none of the things are easy, but it's important to do them.
I agree. I think that's, God created us for fellowship, with that we see that fellowship with him and fellowship with others. So that's why that can be so therapeutic, is just talking to someone else. And in the counseling session, nobody's going to say anything. In groups also, because they normally have confidentiality there, that's going to be the most helpful, because when we release those secrets, then they don't have power over us anymore. So yeah, that's very valuable.
The last thing I want to touch on here, the last topic I kind of want to get into here, is one of your main focuses is forgiveness. not just for our spiritual growth, but for mental and emotional health as well. And you just mentioned letting go of those things, which can also be a form of forgiveness. So, why is forgiveness such a powerful tool for healing? And how can we use this model with our kids or for our kids?
Well, this is what the gospel's all about is forgiveness. God's created us to be a people that need forgiving and a people that forgive. And through that, and we see this in just the regular world too, because I believe when God creates principles, it's not just creating them, He's creating them for all people. And so the research has found that non-forgiveness will cause you it'll create bitterness in you, it'll create resentment in you, anger, and if it goes on, depression. So it's just physically important as well as psychologically important because it doesn't help to just, think on all the things that someone has done wrong to you. But this is the gospel message. God did create us to be forgiven, and God did that. One of the first things in the Garden of Eden. And he still does that today. I think it's an important concept for Christians because and I'm just released a podcast actually today about forgiveness. And I talk about the importance that if we understand what God has done for us, that will make us a forgiving person because God commands that we are to forgive because we are forgiven. And Jesus has given a parable about that too, about, we don't want to be the unmerciful servant. We want to be a person that extends what God has extended to us. And I wrote a children's book on, it's called The Red Ball, and it is specifically for kids learning that very principle of we forgive, even if someone has legitimately done us wrong, that we are to forgive because we understand God's forgiveness of us. And for the secular world, that's still vital that they forgive. They may not attribute it to because God's forgiven them, but it's still important for their own mental, emotional, physical health because it's like a principle like gravity. Like God's created this to be in his people, that we are to be a forgiving people, or we're going to have physical, emotional, and mental non-benefits or whatever consequences of that. So it's important, no matter who you are, that you have to be or learn to be a forgiving person, even in the very hard situations that the person doesn't deserve forgiveness, because it's not really about them. And I talked in the podcast too about how people don't have to come to us for us to forgive them. It's not a requirement. And that as Christians, we don't have to forgive ourselves. We just accept God's forgiveness of us and we walk in that. And for those that are, not Christian, they won't get to do that. So they'll have to work through forgiveness of themselves. So
No, it's spot on here, right? Especially if we're talking like secularly here for a moment, what it does for just a secular person that's not religious. Forgiveness sets you free, right? It's freeing, right? You take back your power through forgiveness, right? Because you can go your whole life holding on to whatever it is against whoever else, right? That person is never, ever, 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 ever going to come and apologize to you for how they wronged you. Maybe they will someday by some miracle, maybe because they found God, or maybe they're dying or something and they're like, oh, I need to make amends with this person kind of thing. So maybe someday. It's very unlikely. That's like a 1% chance. But the more likely, the 99% chance of that is that they're never going to come ask for your forgiveness. So what's the point? And this is, I think, for secular or for Christian or for someone of faith, what's the point in holding on to all that? What good does that do? You're just going to allow it to eat at you and continue to consume your thoughts, and continue to trigger you, even though I don't love that. I wish we had a different word in mental health field for that's not trigger, because trigger is just a terrible word. So we'll work on that. But regardless, we hold on to so many things. We hold on to anger, hurt, resentment, and at the end of the day, the only person that's responsible for that, the only person responsible for moving on from that is you. No one else is going to fix that for you. No one else is going to come through and say, okay, here, you need to forgive this person. It's like, okay, but you're not that person. So why are you telling me to forgive them? You're not that person. They need to come ask me for my forgiveness kind of thing, and I'm going to hold on to it. But you're holding that your whole life, or you're holding that for years on end, maybe. And what good does that do? What good has that done for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, depending on how you're listening to this? What good has that done for you to hold on to that anger and for that hurt and that resentment? Has that ruined a relationship maybe? Has that ruined a friendship? Are they even aware? Is the other person even aware that they hurt you in that way, shape, or form? Probably not. And so you're holding on to these things that are eating at you and hurting you more than it's hurting them. They've already moved on with their life, obviously. They did the thing, they don't care. They're already moving on. They're great. And so why are you letting it affect you? That's the biggest thing here. And it can be really hard to forgive.
Yeah, that one of the things that the mom in my book, the mom tells the little girl, Renata, is that, not forgiving this friend has caused her to become angry and all this stuff. And she asks her, is that the kind of person that you want to be? And so Renata goes to bed that night and prays and decides that's not who she wanted to be. That's not who God created her to be. And that was a release for her of just understanding, like, my decisions help me become more of the person that I want to be and that who God created me to be, or it makes me the other way and I become somebody else. And ultimately, we don't want to be I'm thinking most people don't want to be angry and, bitter, and those people are hard to be around. But bitter and depressed and all that because someone hurt you. That's not the hurting part is bad, but it's not as bad as what you're going to have from the unforgiveness. So, because then you have both. And you can actually experience some healing from forgiveness. So you're really doing yourself an injustice when you don't forgive. And as Christians, if that person were to go repent to God, he would forgive. If they were sincere and all that. So we can't have a higher standard than God on our forgiveness to say, nope, I'm not going to forgive them. That's not how we should be.
Yeah, no, because if God forgives you for the things that you do to others, then that's holding a double standard against the Lord's standard, and that's not where you want to be. You don't want to be there because that's the ultimate standard. That's the example that's set for us, and so it's important for us to teach our kids to forgive even when it's hard, because hard things are good. And just like you mentioned in your book, the girl in your book, she prayed and she's like, "That's not who I want to be. That's not who I am," and so I have to, essentially set myself free from this. Break my own chains, and because we do it to ourselves, we chain ourselves essentially, and we hurt ourselves, we bog ourselves down, and the role that forgiveness plays in parenting and between trust and to build trust and especially work through conflicts is huge, because we have to forgive our kids for making mistakes. Kids have to learn to forgive their parents for making mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, so we have to learn how to forgive each other. We have to learn how to work through those things. Yes, they hurt. Yes, they made us feel, however they made us feel. That's valid. That's fine. But at the same time, ultimately, we have to learn to forgive each other. And we have to learn to give each other another chance because we're given chances every single day, multiple times a day, to do better, to be forgiven. And we mess up all the time. And we're not perfect creatures, we're imperfect creatures. And so we can't hold these high standards. Yes, we're allowed to feel hurt. We're allowed to feel the things we feel. But at the end of the day, we do have to forgive and set ourselves free.
Very true. Very true.
So that's my favorite. Well, from anything we talked about so far, is there anything else that you want to mention or anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to touch on between the different topics so far?
I'm not sure about that. I would encourage people that to not, think that the Bible's not a place that they can go for resources, because it definitely is. And I don't think we use the Bible enough. God's provided promises for us. He's provided wisdom for us. And I think we do ourselves a disservice if we don't access that book, because it's got good stuff in it. We just have to get in it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We do have to just get in it. And we have to start learning. And it's so convenient now to get into it, right? To where there's multiple apps and it's so accessible. We don't have to necessarily carry around a paper Bible anymore. Even one of my pastors was talking about this recently, where it's like, well, we don't have to carry around Bibles. And he's like, I used to think that people who just use their phone, or they were fake, and preachers who were on the sermon or talking at the pulpit were just fake for using their phones and they don't actually know what they're talking about and stuff. He's like, well, now here I am doing the same thing because it's just easier. He's like, one time my phone wasn't working and I didn't have service, or it wasn't turning on, or I forgot to charge it, and I was supposed to talk the next day. And he's like, I was so really grateful I had my Bible, but man, I felt off because I didn't have my notes, and I was like, well, I guess we're winging it, kind of thing. And so so it's so accessible, right? And it makes it so easy to find it, and you can find anything too, right? You can literally type in anything into Google. You can type in Bible verses on anxiety, Bible verses on Psalm 23 is the best for anxiety. But you can just type in verses related to whatever, any topic. You can just Google it and it'll pop up lists upon lists upon lists. I used to do this and it would be like, whoa, I didn't not know that verse was related there. Or okay, let me pull up more around that context. And oh, this is talking about Ezra, this is talking about Nehemiah, or this is talking about Isaiah, or this is talking about Noah, or this is talking about so and so. And so learn so much more context and what people are going through. Man, one of my favorite things that I've heard somewhat recently about the Bible is one of the biggest places people struggle with the Bible is that it's old, right? It feels outdated. It feels inapplicable, whatever, to the modern person, to today, to 2025. But what we have to do is we have to try to put ourselves back in the shoes of the people 2,000 years ago and be like, okay, well, what were they struggling with? Because the audience it's written to is to that audience. So we have to put ourselves back in that audience to really get a deeper, or to help find a deeper understanding of what's going on throughout the Bible. And so just wanted to mention that there. So are you ready for a few fun questions and we'll wrap this thing up?
Fun questions, yes.
Yes, I always like to do some fun questions to kind of bring the conversation back down a little bit. Because it can get really intense sometimes, or it can get really deep. So just to kind of make it lighthearted at the end. First one here is, does pineapple go on pizza?
No.
Perfect. You passed. I will post this episode. And you passed that one flying colors. If you could have a dinner party with 3 people, dead or alive, who would you have at your table?
Think I would have, of course, Jesus, and then maybe a few of the apostles. I don't know. If it weren't biblical, probably I think George Washington, Abraham Lincoln would be fun
Interesting.
to just talk to, especially George. I went to the Mount Vernon place and just to learn his history, and like he didn't want to be president, like because he didn't. Anyway, he's got a very interesting story, and I would like to have a few chats with him.
Yeah. No, those early founder people are always really interesting because it's like, what was going through your head? What was going on in the 1700s that you were like, I'm going to go to this country, and I'm going to start a new country here, kind of thing. Like, what were those
Right.
people thinking? Like, what was going through their head? Or, I used to be Mormon, and then I haven't been Mormon for many, many years. I left the church. I'm just Christian now. But then I watch America Primeval. I don't know if you watch America Primeval on Netflix. It's really good. Kind of gory. It's not for everyone. It's definitely more of a dad show, guy show. But Brigham Young was portrayed in that, and he's known as one of the founders of the Mormon Church in the early 1800s and throughout the early 1800s and whatnot. And the way that he's portrayed in that movie, it's like, I really want to talk to this guy. So know what was going on in your head. What was going through your head? What was going through all your heads to come up with this religion that's now this today? Like, I just want to know. I just want to know. The second to last one here, or third to last question here in total, is what is your guilty pleasure food or guilty pleasure song?
Wow. Well, I'll say guilty pleasure songs, which I don't really listen to them a whole lot because I just listen mostly to Christian now. But I have like all of Madonna's old CDs. I can't give myself to part with them. I don't know why, but I think like some of those words aren't too great. So I don't know why I can't part with them. But I've got like a stack of just her CDs.
Okay,
Yeah. As far as food, probably I don't know that it's guilty, but I love to eat nuts of any sort, and so I eat a lot of walnuts, pecans, all of them, hazelnut, the whole kit and caboodle.
I like it. I like it. And
Yeah.
what is one of your favorite, if not your favorite, Bible verse?
The verse that really transformed my life caused me to rededicate my life was from Romans, the do not be conformed by the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That is part of my testimony in that God had revealed to me how I was trying to walk both paths of the world and his way. And so that one I like, and I use it in practice a lot too, because the renewing your mind part is what I help people do through God's word and through truth. So that's been an important verse to me in my own walk, but also in my continuing walk. But probably which I don't have memorized, but Zephaniah 3:17 is I consider that my favorite verse, but my life verse is probably Romans. I think it's 12.
I love it. I love it. And the very last question here. If you were to give one piece of advice to a young mom or a young dad who's just starting out their parenting journey, let's say they're 18 to 22 years old, what is the one piece of advice that you would offer them?
Oh, wow. Well, probably, I guess I don't know. That's pretty big question, Jay.
If you could offer them one piece of advice.
I would say probably to apologize when you do things wrong and forgive easily. I think that, you're going to mess up, and just know that we're not going to be perfect. Our kids might be in therapy when they're older too, just because of things that we did that we didn't think were. But I think if we could be humble as we raise them and know that we don't have all the answers and we're doing the best that we can, and just, and when they mess up, that we can forgive them too, not act out of emotion in those areas. So I'm not sure if that's one piece of advice, but
I love it. I love it. Well, Healy, this conversation has been incredibly insightful. So thank you for sharing your wisdom on how faith, mental health, and parenting all intersect all together, and how we were able to get into all of it today. I really appreciate it. For our listeners, if today's episode resonated with you, be sure to grab Healy's free resource, 5 specific things to reduce anxiety in life. And you can do that by going to subscribepage.io/BWSCBN. I'll put that in the show notes, but it's subscribepage.io/BWSCBN. But this free guide is packed with actionable steps to help you and your family build a more peaceful and anxiety-free life. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you learned something from it. I hope you were able to feel something from this episode. And I hope you're able to take something away and some kind of actionable change, something that you want to do different, whether it's dive deeper into your faith or, to learn to forgive more or anything like that. Feel free to do it all. Feel free to reach out, send messages. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe, do all the things you can to support the podcast. And just remember, you are worthy, you are loved, you are enough, and you are doing a great job. Until next time, stay present, stay engaged, and keep leading your family with love and faith.